smoke from the rice mill always came before the trucks did. A thin gray ribbon over the tree line drifting south, settling into the low places where the cold air pooled at dawn. Before anyone in Callaway County heard an engine, they could smell the burning husks. That smell meant something different to everyone who lived near Route 9. To most, it meant a nuisance. To 11-year-old Eli Tanner, it meant something else entirely. It meant waste. And waste, his grandfather used to say, was just a resource sitting in the wrong place. Eli was small for his age, narrow-shouldered, with a sunburned neck and a notebook he kept in his back pocket no matter what chore he was doing. He wore the same canvas jacket through 3 winters because it still fit loose enough to grow into. On the morning this story really begins, he was kneeling in a fallow field behind his family's house, pressing his palm flat against the dirt the way his grandfather had taught him, not to feel temperature, but to feel structure, whether the ground gave or resisted. The Tanner farm was 41 acres outside Callaway, established in 1962 by Eli's great-grandfather, who'd grown soybeans on it until the soil started giving less. Every year he farmed it harder. By the time it passed to Eli's grandfather, 20 of those acres had gone fallow, too depleted, too compacted, the topsoil thin as a bedsheet. The farmhouse had been painted white once. Nobody could say exactly when it stopped being white, only that by the time Eli was born, it had weathered to the color of a dry creek bed. In the kitchen drawer, wrapped in a plastic bread bag, was his grandfather's old soil journal, pages of handwritten notes on which fields needed lime, which held water too long, which years the yields had dropped and why. His grandfather had died the previous spring. Eli kept the journal in his jacket pocket now, alongside his own. Half a mile down Route 9 sat Callaway Valley Rice and Grain Processing, a mid-sized mill that had been hulling rice for 3 counties since the late 1980s. Rice husks were its biggest waste problem. For every ton of rice processed, roughly 200 kilograms of husk came off as byproduct, and the mill produced close to 4,000 tons of it a year. For over a decade, the company's solution had been simple. Truck it to a low, unused stretch of land near the property line and burn it in open piles twice a week, May through October. Representatives from Callaway Valley's operations division had told the township board on more than one occasion that the practice was standard agricultural waste management, fully compliant with state burn ordinances. They arrived at these meetings in clean trucks with the company logo on the doors, carrying tablets loaded with combustion compliance data and air quality readings that always came back, conveniently, just under the threshold. Eli didn't go to those meetings. He was 11, but he watched the smoke every week from his bedroom window, and he wrote down the wind direction in his notebook, the way his grandfather had taught him to track frost lines. Now, if you've ever been the person in the room who actually understood what was happening and had nobody listen because you were too young, too quiet, or just didn't have the right title in front of your name, you already know exactly how this story is going to feel. This channel is built around people like that, the overlooked ones who turn out to be right. If that's ever been you, go ahead and hit subscribe, because there are a lot more of these stories coming. And while you're here, drop a comment and let me know what town or state you're watching this from. I read everyone. Now, let's get back to Callaway County, and to a fallow field that was about to get its second chance. Rice husk, Eli's grandfather had written in the journal years earlier, is mostly silica, close to 20% by weight, wrapped around a stubborn lignin structure that breaks down slow. Burn it, and you lose most of the carbon, and the silica turns to a glassy ash that doesn't do soil much good. But composted, or worked in raw and let rot, it does something different. It opens up clay-heavy ground, lets water move through instead of pooling, and slowly releases potassium and that same silica in a form roots can actually use. Eli had read this passage so many times the page had gone soft at the corner. He started small, without telling his father. Every Sunday, he rode his bike to the edge of the mill's burnyard, legally accessible, since the husk piles sat on a public turnout before they were torched, and filled 5-gallon buckets with husk that hadn't been burned yet. He hauled it home 2 buckets at a time, balanced on his handlebars, and worked it into a 4x8 test bed at the corner of the fallow field. He mixed it with composted manure from the 3 goats his family kept. layered it the way an old extension pamphlet he'd found described, and recorded everything: date, ratio, weather, how deep he'd tilled it in. By August, he had 4 months of soil moisture readings using a cheap probe his grandfather had left in the shed, alongside before and after dirt clods he kept in mason jars on the windowsill, dated and labeled in pencil. The test bed crumbled when he picked it up. The compacted ground 10 feet away still came up in a hard, dry slab. He brought this to his father first. His father, a quiet man named Eli Tanner, who worked the farm and a parts counter job in town to make ends meet, looked at the jars and the notebook and said, not unkindly, "Eli, that's 1 bucket of dirt. The mill's been burning that husk for 15 years. You think you found something 15 years of grown men missed?" Eli didn't argue. He just kept the jars. In September, Callaway Valley Rice and Grain announced an expansion, a second processing line that would nearly double husk output, and with it, double the burn schedule. At the township meeting, a regional operations manager named Dale Corrigan stood at the podium with a printed handout showing projected air quality impact, all of it within state limits. Eli's father went to that meeting and, almost as an afterthought, mentioned that his son had been messing around with composting the husk instead of burning it. Corrigan smiled the patient smile of a man who'd heard 100 kitchen table theories. "We appreciate that," he said, "but we've got an EPA-compliant burn protocol that's been vetted by our environmental consultants. A backyard experiment isn't really apples to apples with an industrial operation." The room moved on to budget items. The expansion went forward in October. Burn frequency went from twice a week to 5 days a week. By November, 3 families along Route 9, including the Tanners, were reporting persistent coughing in their kids during burn evenings. By December, the township's part-time environmental liaison, a young woman named Priya Sahota, recently hired with a master's in soil and environmental science from 2 years back, was asked to do a basic air and runoff assessment after a resident complaint about ash settling on standing water in a drainage ditch. She tested the ditch water in January and found elevated silica particulate and pH irregularities consistent with ash runoff. That alone wasn't unusual for a rural burn operation. What got her attention was something else. While going door to door asking residents if they'd noticed changes, she met Eli, who handed her his notebook without being asked twice. She read it on his kitchen table for 40 minutes. 4 months of moisture data, soil structure notes, the mason jars lined up like evidence, which, by then, they were. "This is more rigorous than half the data I get from contractors," she told him. She asked if she could photograph every page. Sahota's full report, filed in February, didn't just flag the burn emissions. It included a side-by-side comparison, citing Eli's testbed data alongside her own lab analysis of the husk ash versus raw husk compost, arguing that the mill was destroying a usable soil amendment while creating an avoidable air quality liability, in a county where over 60% of farmland tested at below optimal organic content. The report went to the township board and, because of the air quality flags, to a state environmental compliance reviewer as well. In March, Callaway Valley Rice and Grain was issued a formal notice requiring an updated waste management plan within 90 days, with the company facing a daily fine if it continued the burn schedule unmodified. Dale Corrigan came to the Tanner farm himself in April, not in the clean truck with the logo, in his own car. He stood at the edge of the fallow field, now 8 months into Eli's experiment, and looked at the test bed, which by then had been planted in winter rye and was visibly darker, looser, holding its shape under a boot in a way the surrounding ground didn't. "Your boy was right," he said to Russell. Then, quieter, to Eli directly, "We had 15 years of burn data. We didn't have a single season of what you've got here. We should have listened sooner." He didn't make a show of it. He shook Eli's hand once, the way you'd shake hands with someone twice your age, and left. By the following spring, Callaway Valley had converted its burn yard into a composting operation, partnering with 3 local farms, the Tanners among them, to take husk on a rotating delivery schedule, free of charge, in exchange for soil monitoring data the mill could use for its own compliance reporting. The fallow 20 acres on the Tanner farm came back into rotation over the next 2 seasons. Soybeans first, then corn. Sahota stayed on with the township in an expanded role and kept a standing invitation to test soil on any field in the county for free, an offer she said was inspired by a kid with mason jars. Eli didn't get rich, didn't get famous beyond a short piece in the regional paper that ran his picture next to a wheelbarrow. He still rides his bike down Route 9 most Sundays, though there's nothing left to haul. The husk comes by the truckload now, delivered, composted on site in long covered rows behind the barn. He keeps his grandfather's journal in the same kitchen drawer, his own notebook nearly full beside it. The smoke doesn't come before the trucks anymore. These days what comes first is the smell of turned earth. It wasn't waste, it was just misplaced.